So, who actually controls the EV future? EVs are not just changing what we drive, they're reshaping global industry and power. Our guest is Mike Barnard, a well known analyst and writer focused on electrification, clean energy, and the global energy transition. In this presentation, Mike explains who controls the EV supply chain, how China built such a strong lead, and what that means for the future of transportation, manufacturing, and energy. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. The energy transition is not going to fail because the world runs out of useful minerals. The planet has lithium, copper, nickel, cobalt, graphite, manganese, phosphate, rare earths, and the rest in sufficient quantities. The real question is industrial. Who can mine them, refine them, process them, turn them into battery materials, magnets, power electronics, grid equipment, and vehicles, and deliver them into bankable factories at the right price and time? That matters for Canada. Canada has geology, mining expertise, clean electricity in many provinces, proximity to the United States, and trusted relationships with Europe and Asia. But rocks in the ground are not a strategic position by themselves. A mine is not a supply chain. A deposit is not a factory. A press release is not industrial policy. So Canada's question is not how do we become mineral independent? We won't. Neither will anyone else. The question is, how do we become useful, trusted, and hard to coerce in the parts of the supply technology chain that actually matter? The West faces two risks at once. The first is obvious. China controls a large share of the industrial middle of the battery, magnet, and critical minerals value chains. Not because it owns every deposit. It doesn't. China has leverage because it built refining, chemical conversion, anode cathode, rare earth separation, magnet, and battery manufacturing capacity. That's the middle of the chain. That's where the power sits. The second risk is less comfortable given our location, but it matters. The United States is powerful, wealthy, and technically capable, but its federal government can no longer be treated as a stable anchor for allied industrial strategy. Any strategy now has to start with that as a planning assumption. The US still has capital markets, national labs, defense procurement, strong firms, engineering talent, and state-level industrial competition. But federal policy swings too much for 15-year industrial investment to assume continuity. So Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan, and South Korea are building supply chains in a world where China has industrial leverage and the US has become a high-capability, low-reliability partner. That's awkward. It's also the world we are actually in. The answer isn't panic. It is coercion-resistant electrification. The next big mistake is treating critical minerals as one bucket, and they are not one problem. They are different bottlenecks. Lithium is a scale and conversion problem. Batteries still need lithium in the most high-volume chemistries. The issue is not that the world lacks lithium items. The issue is brines, mines, permits, chemical conversion, finance, and timing. Graphite is different. It's less discussed than lithium, but it may be one of the sharper Western exposures. LFP batteries reduce nickel and cobalt risk, but anodes still matter. Battery-grade spherical graphite processing is a specialized industrial step, and China is very strong there. Copper is different again. Copper is not just a battery story, it's a grid story. EVs need chargers, chargers need distribution systems, wind and solar need interconnections. Data centers need substations, heat pumps, motors, transformers, and switchgear all need electrical infrastructure. Copper turns electrification from a slogan into wires in and above the ground. Rare earths are mostly about separation and magnets, not rarity. Gallium and germanium are often byproducts, which makes supply less responsive to price signals. So strategy starts by naming the bottleneck. Lithium may need more mining, refining, and recycling. Graphite might need anode processing outside China. Copper may need grid planning, substitution in some cases, and mine investment. Rare earths may need separation and magnet manufacturing. Byproduct metals may need recovery systems and stockpiles. A general mineral emergency is not a strategy. A decomposed set of problems is the basis for a strategy. Most public debate talks about mining. Mining matters, of course, but China's leverage is not mainly because it owns all the rocks. It's because it controls so many industrial steps after the rocks come out of the ground. Look across the chain. Mining, concentration, refining and conversion, processed metals, components, end products, collection and recycling. The risk is usually not the rock, it's the middle of the chain. That is where raw material becomes battery-grade chemicals, anodes, cathodes, magnet materials, components, and manufactured inputs. It's also where bankability lives. A Western automaker does not need lithium in theory. It needs the right chemical form, quality, documentation, price, delivery window, and political risk profile. Canada has to be careful here. If Canada thinks of itself mainly as a mine and export country, we leave strategic value on the table. The next step is selected processing, refining, recovery, recycling, workforce development, indigenous and community legitimacy, clean power supply, and bankable offtake. That does not mean Canada should try to do everything. Not every mine is strategic. Not every refinery deserves support. Not every battery announcement will become a plant. But where Canada can connect minerals, clean electricity, credible permitting, allied customers, and processing strategy, that is strategy. Processing capacity, that is strategy. Where we just ship concentrate and call it sovereignty, that's just leaving money, expertise, and resilience on the table. The credible American critical mineral strategy is no longer a Washington strategy. It is distributed across states, utilities, firms, defense procurement, public power agencies, national labs, and private contracts. A federal speech has limited value. A closed Department of Energy loan has value. A defense procurement contract for tungsten has value. A utility-scale battery storage procurement has value. A 10-year automaker offtake contract has value. A state-backed industrial cluster with power, roads, permits, workforce, and customers has value. The U.S. should be judged by what becomes contractual, financed, and under construction, not what is announced from a podium in Washington. For Canada, that means we should not treat the United States as one actor. California is not the White House. A Texas storage developer is not a tariff threat. The Pentagon is not campaign rhetoric. A signed offtake agreement with an automaker is not a policy speech. Canada should work with the American institutions that can deliver and design around the ones that can reverse. That means states, firms, utilities, public power agencies, defense buyers, national labs, and finance institutions. It means real contracts over vague alignment. Europe has strong rules and market power, but weaker industrial depth. It has battery passports, recycling rules, carbon footprint disclosure, due diligence requirements, and a large premium market. Europe's Critical Raw Materials Act sets 2030 targets: 10% domestic extraction, 40% processing, 25% recycling, and no more than 65% dependence on a single third country for any strategic raw material at a relevant processing stage. Those numbers are not a claim of independence. They are a diversification strategy. The 40% target is more strategic than the 10% extraction target. Europe can miss some domestic mining emissions and still improve its position if it builds refining, separation, precursor, anode, cathode, and recycling capacity. Europe's great risk is it becomes excellent at regulating supply chains it does not control. Beautiful standards, thick binders, elegant compliance systems, and the industrial middle still somewhere else. The opportunity is to make standards into demand. Battery passport, recycled content, embedded carbon, and due diligence can shape supply chains because firms want access to the European market. This is where Canada fits naturally. Canada can be a trusted supplier into European standards-based markets, but trusted supplier should not mean just ore and concentrate. It should mean lower carbon materials, traceable supply, indigenous and community legitimacy, processing partnerships, recycling loops, and contracts that make projects financeable. Canada should not merely ask, can Europe buy our minerals? It should ask, which parts of the European premium traceable circular supply chain can Canada credibly serve? By 2030, the battery minerals market will be much larger and still China-centered. China's share may fall as other regions build capacity, but falling from overwhelming dominance to major dominance is diversification, not autonomy. By 2035, the question is whether the West built real supply chains or merely announced capacity. A gigafactory without secure inputs is not enough. A mine without refining is not enough. A tariff without production is not enough. A standard without industrial capacity is influence but not control. The goal should not be mineral independence. That phrase invites bad policy. No large industrial economy is independent of global supply chains. The right goal is fewer choke points. That means enough diversified supply, enough friend-shored processing, enough chemistry substitution, enough recycling, enough targeted stockpiles, and enough trusted demand that no single country can halt the transition by squeezing one node. China does not have to be excluded from everything. That would be expensive and slow. The goal isn't purity, the goal is resilience. For Canada, that means three practical things. First, stop confusing geology with strategy. Canada's deposits matter, but the value is in the chain. Second, build around allies, but do not outsource judgment to Washington. Work with serious American counterparties, but don't make US federal continuity the load-bearing assumption. Third, use Canada's real advantages: clean electricity, mining competence, engineering capability, trust, proximity to markets, Indigenous partnership when done properly, environmental legitimacy when earned, not asserted. The next decade isn't about finding enough rocks. It is about rebuilding the industrial capacity and international trust required to turn rocks into electrification. For Canada, that's not a side issue. It is one of the cleaner industrial opportunities sitting right in front of us.
So the minerals are not the problem. The middle of the chain is. Canada has geology, clean electricity, and trusted relationships. Whether we turn that into real industrial strategy or keep shipping out concentrate and call it sovereignty is one of the big decisions in front of us right now. If you found this useful and interesting, please subscribe and watch for more helpful EV related presentations.